When it comes to all things baby, I was completely clueless. I had no idea what I was doing or what I needed for my little guy until I discovered Nurtured. Located in the north end of Halifax, Nurtured is the go-to spot in Atlantic Canada for all your baby needs. The team at Nurtured educated me on the best brands, including UPPAbaby, Bugaboo, and Knack. I also don't know where I'd be without my Monty glider chair. It was an absolute lifesaver with those sleepless nights, and now it's perfect for just reading and relaxing in. Plus, it's Canadian made and looks beautiful in the nursery. Nurtured offers registry services, baby wearing consultations, bra fittings, certified car seat installations, and stroller assembly. They also provide fast shipping and local delivery with a low minimum spend threshold. Visit nurtured.ca to learn more. Lindsay Lewis, welcome to the Mom Existence.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited because you are a certified sleep trainer and also a parent coach.
Yeah.
And I feel like those are literally probably two of the hardest things that parents deal with is like adjusting to the lack of sleep.
Yeah.
Figuring out sleep forever. I feel like until they're teenagers, it's hard to figure out. And then also how to communicate and talk and deal with behaviors of our children.
Yeah. Yeah. No, they're huge challenges and something that I definitely wasn't prepared to deal with when I had my first. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about it. I know what the struggles look like and I know how frustrating it can be for parents. So it's definitely, something that everyone struggles with to some degree or another.
Because you have 3 kids, right?
Yes.
How old are they?
So they're now 8, 11, and 13. So definitely a bit older, but new challenges as they get older, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And did you, and I don't think we worked together a bit when, I was spiraling at certain times when my child wasn't sleeping and trying to figure out sleep training. But I don't think I know this. When did you start this business or becoming a sleep trainer and a parent coach?
Yeah, so I became a sleep coach about 7.5 years ago. Okay. So my daughter was about 1 when I started, right around 12 months. So
you really got it.
What's that?
Like you really understood what was happening.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people think I started after my first son because that's when I really struggled and I became super interested in sleep and started kind of helping friends and family. But I didn't actually get certified until my 3rd child. I've been doing that for 7.5 years. And then I just did my parenting certification last fall. So that's a newer kind of aspect of my business that I'm still kind of getting into, but it's really nice to work with families like longer term as different things come up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're their like little secret weapon. Okay, so when you say that you were in it with your children, you had your you weren't like professionally or certified, I guess, but like how were you helping people before you were technically certified and able to say I'm a sleep trainer? Yeah,
I mean, it was very casual. Mm-hmm. It was like I found a program that really worked when my son was 4 months. I was like hit a wall basically where I was like, the adrenaline's gone. I'm exhausted. I'm not enjoying this at all. And I said to my husband, like, we need to find something that works. There was only maybe 1 or 2 sleep consultants in Nova Scotia at the time, and I didn't even know about them. So that wasn't even an option. So I found a program, which I use Sleep Sense, and that's who I'm certified with.
Okay.
And then once I did it and I saw how successful it was, people were asking me like, oh, how is your son such a good sleeper? So I would tell them a bit about it. And then I just became super interested, started reading books, blogs, and just became really fascinated with sleep. But it was definitely like, just here or there. I wasn't I wasn't charging people or anything. It was just sort of.
Right, like relaying the information, the tips and tricks.
Yeah.
And it is so interesting because I didn't think about how much work and how much kind of understanding you need to get around sleep training because you just assume you're getting no sleep, that you just lay them down. I don't know, they'll go to sleep, but you do hit that wall where you're trying to either have a shower or do something, they won't nap, they won't sleep. So it is good to kind of like have a base knowledge, I think, of what you need to do or how you need to, I
I don't like using the word train, but I
I
guess
know,
right,
I don't like it either.
train your child.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting where you were helping your friends and family, because I feel
Yeah.
the same way sometimes about people that I know.
Yeah.
And not that I'm an expert, but I know, like, you know, some little things, or I'll
Yeah.
recommend a sleep trainer or someone like you, or online course for
Mhm.
someone to go, because you really
Yeah.
are desperate in the time.
Definitely.
You know, you're sleep deprived
Yes.
and you just need some type of baseline of what you should be doing, because I remember once you kind of figure it out, it feels so good that you have like a
Yes.
tool.
Yes, exactly. And you know it's possible at that point. So when you see friends struggling, you're like, there's an answer.
Yeah.
Like you just kind of want to shout it from the rooftops that like you don't have to be sleep deprived. Like for the first few weeks, yeah, you're going to be tired for sure.
There's no schedule in the very
No.
beginning.
No.
Let's get that clear. As they
No.
get older, it gets more systematic, would you say?
Yeah, like there's more pattern to the sleep. You can establish habits, like teach or sleep learning or teaching, as I like to call it. So
Sleep learning.
yeah, I mean
Learning for the mom, dad, parents.
exactly,
and the baby.
It's for everyone,
Yeah.
right? It's like often parents will say to me throughout the process, like I'm figuring that I'm like learning as I go that it was actually I'm the problem.
Yeah.
It's not my baby. It's that I'm doing these certain things that are no longer working for us. And it's up to me as the parent to make those changes.
Exactly.
So it's, it's
and
a
I
lot.
think we all default into doing some bad habits because we just
100%.
They work sometimes, but
Yep.
then they don't work long term. They're kind of
Yeah.
like these short term, like maybe, I don't know, sleeping with the baby on you,
Yeah,
or
100%.
soothers and things like that. But
Yeah.
you kind of forget. Even my son is about 20 months old.
Yeah.
And how resilient and how adaptable that they actually are. That mentally
Yes.
you think, I can't get rid of the soother. I can't get rid of this. I can't do that. And then you do it once or twice and they don't know the difference.
Exactly.
But for the parents, it's
Exactly.
mentally, it's a block.
It's
I
a
would
block,
say.
100%. Yeah, the amount of times people say to me, like, I had no idea my child was capable of this is like, it happens all the time. And I think, yeah, it's us as parents that are often getting in the way because we think our child needs certain things. And, sometimes we also don't want to deal with what that's going to look like when you take something away. But yeah, it's a learning process for everyone, for sure.
Absolutely. And I feel like they just don't come out. I don't know. Do you ever hear this? Like babies just don't come out and start sleeping through the night, or in a few months they just sleep through the night. Like A, they might need food. B,
Yeah.
they're poop themselves or they're wet. Like there's
Yeah.
always things that are going to interrupt their sleep.
Yeah, 100%.
I had this one question or something that popped up the other day. I'm thinking about especially very new moms, whether it's nap time, bedtime, whatever, and we're in the chair or we're in the bed and you're rocking them and you're on your phone. Do they know that you're on your phone? Like, does that, because I know light
Yeah.
is a huge thing that you need to have really, really dark rooms,
Yeah.
especially in the beginning, because they're used to being in a warm little dark
Yeah.
room.
Exactly.
Do they know? Because I feel like so many of us are on our phones and scroll while they're sleeping.
I think that, like, if you're doing it, I always tell parents, like, if you're feeding in the night, don't be scrolling your phone because the light does, like,
Even though their eyes are closed.
Even if their eyes
Yeah.
are closed, it still can disrupt melatonin production. It can make it harder for them to go back to sleep. If you're doing like a contact nap and you're in your living room, probably not
'cause
going to
it's
bother
daylight.
them. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But I mean, you do want to be aware of that for sure. It does. It does. You know what it's like if you're in a dark room and your phone
That's
is
true.
lit.
Yeah.
It lights up most of the room.
I
so,
know.
yeah.
Sometimes now, like my son was just sick forever, and then he had hand, foot, mouth disease.
Oh no.
The worst. So I was stuck
Yeah.
a few times, and I'm like, I'm just gonna scroll on my phone, and I
Yeah.
feel like, can he feel me? Anyways, am I disrupting him? But
Yeah.
he's
no.
fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So what were the common things that people come to you right now for when they have
Yeah.
like newborns or a few months old? Like, what are they just hitting a wall because they're not sleeping? Or are there certain things that
Yeah.
they're upset about? Like, what would be the common thing someone would come to you for help?
I find that most people come to me when what they're doing is no longer sustainable. So for a lot of people, feeding to sleep or rocking to sleep will work quite well for a number of weeks or months. And then not always, but often it does stop working as well. And then, it's like the common challenges. You go to transfer your baby to the crib and they wake up and then it takes 2 hours
you
to
have
get
to
them back
redo
to
everything.
sleep. Exactly. Or they're, they were previously waking once a night and now they're waking 5 times a night because as babies get older, they become more aware. So often the habits that you were previously using, they stop working as well. And that can look different for every baby. It's often around the 4-month mark where their sleep actually changes and they're in more light sleep. So often they do wake more frequently at night. Naps are shorter. They're harder to transfer. But I've seen babies that actually kind of get through that 4-month mark relatively well. And then it's like more towards 8, 9, 10 months that things start to derail quite a bit. So yeah, like
I dealt with that.
Yeah, exactly.
As you get older, I felt like it changed a lot.
It does. Yeah. And I always say to people, like, if what you're doing's working, keep doing it. Like, there's no reason you have to sleep train or you have to teach your child to go to bed independently if everything's working for everyone. But most people will come to me when they just feel like what they're doing is no longer sustainable, or if, often it's like there's a lot of contact naps and the parent is craving being able to put their child down and do some things around the house or do something for themselves. So it's I think people just kind of hit a wall where they're like, you know what, I'm not enjoying this anymore. I feel like I could parent better if I was sleeping better. So yeah, and then I do get contacted quite a bit in the newborn phase, which I always say to people, like, unfortunately, there's not a lot we can control in those first few weeks. Like the biggest things are to establish feeding, bond with your baby, nourish yourself, get yourself
Well, they're just
recuperated.
adjusting to being, again, outside of your body into this new world.
That's right.
And I feel like in the first few weeks or even the first month or two, it's kind of like just ride the wave. Just ride the wave.
You have to. Yeah. Because they change so much week to week. I always say to people, like, if something's working well right now, it's probably not going to work next week, or vice versa.
100%.
So you do have to kind of accept it, which is hard. Like, I'm very much a type A person, so I found the newborn stage very difficult.
I would agree with you because I know I ran into this girl that I kind of know, and she lives near me, has a little baby, I don't know, maybe like 4 or 5 months old, and he was so sweet. And she's like, I just see like naps on the go. He sleeps through the night. He's a great sleeper. And I admired that because I can't do that because I'm very schedule based. I need to have structure or something to fall back on for my sanity. And I think, like you said, it really depends kind of on what's making you kind of like happy or comfortable. If that doesn't bother you or you want the baby strapped to you all the time, like do what feels good.
Yeah.
I know in the last few months, as my son's gotten older, and maybe it's just more of a separation thing or getting older, it's like, I have to rock him to sleep now.
Oh.
I never did. Like, I would do it obviously when he was little at night, lay him down, no problem. He would go to sleep.
Yeah.
But now he just, I don't know. And I can't deal with him like standing and crying and throwing stuff out. So, and it's working, but it's time consuming.
Yeah.
But I need to stop. And he's been sick and then he started daycare. So I'm just waiting for like a good pattern of, I don't know. I'm
like
probably just convincing myself. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is one of those things that this is very common because as babies become toddlers, they do test limits, right? So
they know how to say yes and no.
Exactly. And then all of a sudden, if you do something once, like say he's sick and you're like, oh, he's miserable, I'm going to hold him to sleep or rock him to sleep. That sets the new expectation, right? Okay. So then what happens is the child decides like, why would I go to sleep on my own?
Yeah.
Exactly. Like I much prefer mom to cuddle me and rock me to sleep, which there's nothing wrong with. Like if that's working for you and he's sleeping well at night and you don't mind doing it, then it's totally fine to continue to do that.
Is it?
Well, so here's the thing. It's like
I love it, but I hate it at the same time. You know, it's kind of that double-edged thing. But I think this is, I did get a few questions through Instagram, and a lot of them, probably because some of them are my friends, are in that toddler phase. And it's like, before you can kind of like in a healthy way, let them cry it out. You know the boundary of like, okay, a few minutes or I have to go back in, which is hard. But now because they're older, it's like a whole new level of screaming or crying. And I'm like, do I let him cry it out? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't personally love Cry It Out for toddlers just because I find it's not super nice for
No,
something
and he's
they're
throwing all
used
this stuff out
to.
of his crib. I mean, he has like 3
Exactly.
stuffed animals, but he's throwing those out. And
Yeah.
I feel bad he doesn't have them, so I go back in.
Then you go back
and
in.
It's just like a mess.
Yeah. I mean, usually what I suggest for toddlers is like providing some support the first few nights as they're relearning or learning how to put themselves to sleep. So that might look like, instead of rocking him to sleep, putting him down awake, but sitting on the floor next to the crib and holding his hand for a couple nights, and then gradually.
Even if they're screaming and crying?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so that's the thing. Like, you do have to be okay that, like, he's going to have some big feelings about it, because whenever you change a habit, your child's going to let you know that they're not happy about it. So you do have to be willing to know, like, okay, he's going to be mad about this, but it's okay. I'm going to be right there beside him, or I'm going to be checking in on him. And the amazing thing is like you said, they adjust so quickly. So a lot of parents think like, oh my gosh, this is going to take like 3 weeks. It's going to be awful. Often, if you're consistent and you don't kind of go back to what you were doing, usually in like 3 or 4 nights, the child's good to go.
I can do 3 or 4 nights. If you said 3 or 4 weeks, I'd just keep rocking him.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And it's funny, my mom watches him. She's the only other person besides my husband or I that I would, or has put him to bed.
Yeah.
Right now, and she loves rocking him and like snuggling with him, which is
Yeah.
fun. But is that
Yeah.
this is something we've kind of talked about? Is that something that's going to screw him up if I kind of stick to letting him get himself to sleep, getting through those few days that are difficult, and then
Yeah.
she does that? I mean, once every couple weeks or whatever. Is that
Yeah.
going to mess him up, or do I need her to stick to that as well?
I would say, like, when you're trying to reestablish those skills, if she is going to look after him, I would try to get her to do the same thing, or just not have her put him down for this first couple weeks.
mom.
I just had a client that had to do this. Like, their
really?
mom was coming in every second day, and we had to be like, you're not coming in for a couple weeks, just so that we could get this baby's skills really well established. Once things are going well and like he's going down easily, independently every night, then every so often your mom doing something different, like rocking him to sleep, shouldn't cause a big regression, because toddlers can compartmentalize their sleep. That's why, like at daycare, they'll often sleep on cots on the floor.
And they just walk over and lay down and sleep, and I don't get it.
Yeah. And it's not like when he's home, he's expecting that, right? Like they are good at kind of differentiating between people and environments. So it should be fine. I would just say that the important thing would be for you and your husband to be consistent with what you do.
Okay.
Right? Not go
I'm
back
trying
and
this
forth.
tonight. It's happening.
Yeah, good. I like it. Might
And
as
he's
well.
also in the phase where he does not want dad to put him to bed. It's only mom.
Yes.
And I
so
ask him,
common.
like you said, that they kind of in that phase now where they know what they want or
Yeah.
they have opinions.
Yeah.
And I'll read him a book. I shut the light off. I rock. We talk kind of, or I tell him a story that I just make up, obviously. And I'll say, do you want to lay in your crib? It will be comfortable. Your teddies are in there. And he straight up is like, no. And so I say, do you want to stay with me? Yes. So I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
fuck. I just get like roped in. I don't know.
know. Yeah.
But when he was a baby, I did have to. They do cry and have a little bit of like a gentle crying out kind of like phase for a few days. You're right. And then it's just like magic. You lay them down.
Yeah.
You leave. They might cry. They might talk. They roll asleep.
Yeah.
So I feel like I just need to remember that.
Yeah. And I will say, like, it is harder with a 20-month-old, because his version of protest isn't just like a light cry or a fuss. It's like, mama, or like a terrible scream. So it's much harder to listen to.
Yeah, I know.
So just know, like,
it.
that's normal. But just like when he was an infant, they do adjust. As long as you're consistent, he will adjust.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just lay there, hold his hand, talk to him until he like goes to sleep, or just for a few minutes, leave, come back in.
It's
Is that
up
like
to
part
you.
of your? Okay.
I would say
This podcast has turned into just
just
my
a coaching
own,
session.
consulting class.
I would also, like, I mean, he's still young for sure, but I would tell him beforehand what's going to happen. Like that's that's more respectful than to just throw it on him when he's expecting you to rock him to sleep. If all of a sudden, like you're putting him down, like you're going to do this on your own, he's not going to be happy.
Okay.
So I would talk about like, okay, after we read our books and we turn out the lights and mommy sings you your song, you're going to go into your crib and I'm going to hold your hand and I'm going to sit right here.
Okay.
Just so he can start to like wrap his mind around.
I do that a lot, and I had a lot of advice for the day, like starting daycare and that routine that I would tell him.
Yes.
Even now when he wakes up, I say it's like daycare day, and he literally sometimes stares at me and just listens. I can see the wheels turning, and that's probably part of your parent coaching kind of method too, is explaining and talking, because they are little. They do understand.
They do understand.
They do understand, and I feel like that can be very effective. So we're gonna do that.
Yeah.
Okay, before we talk about some of the parent coaching stuff, there were a few questions that I'll kind of put them together. Is a few questions about toddlers again, which is like transitioning from crib to bed, or when do I use blankets or pillows, I guess, in the crib.
Yeah.
Like, how can you kind of help paint that picture for parents that are in that struggle of like, my child's 2 or around 2, when do I transition them to like a big bed?
Yeah, I recommend as close to 3 as possible.
3? Okay.
Yeah. And that's just because impulse control is very low before 3. Even at 3, it's not great.
Okay.
So once you remove the physical boundary of a crib, it's a toddler's natural instinct to try to explore their environment. So I do find closer to 3 is best. Obviously, if there's any safety concerns, like if your 2.5-year-old is jumping out of the crib head first and hurting themselves, then yes, you can move them to a bed. Safety trumps that. But I think if they're happy in their crib, there's no signs of climbing out, anything like that, then 3 is best. In terms of blankets and pillows, I usually recommend introducing those once they're out of a crib.
Okay.
I think the actual recommendation, and I'll double check this, I think it's 2 for like a pillow.
Little flat
Exactly.
pillow. Yeah.
You would want to use like a toddler pillow. I actually prefer, if your child's already in a sleep sack, I prefer to keep them in a sleep sack until they're in a bed.
Okay.
Just because, number one, they're used to it. It can't fall off in the night because some toddlers will call you back in 10 times to put their blankets back on them. So it prevents that. It also discourages a child from trying to climb out of the crib because they can't get their leg over the top.
That's a good point. We haven't had that happen yet, but I know some people that their kids can jump out. I feel like the way ours is structured, I don't know, he can't, but I mean, they can.
Yeah, and
they can get the upper body
that's
strength.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you sometimes think it's the leg, but I've seen like 16-month-olds pull themselves up with their upper body strength.
That's
like
terrifying.
It's actually amazing that they can do that.
Yeah.
But it's terrifying because often they're falling out and it's not.
Exactly. If they're in a sleep sack or it's pitch black, they can't see.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, I kind of had that question, about the sleep sack, because I feel like my parents, or that generation, is so confused by the sleep sack.
I know.
They are so confused. They have so many questions. Why did they wear that? How long are they going to wear it? When are they done with the sleep sack? I'm like, who cares about the sleep sack? Like, why do we care?
I know.
Just
that
put
and
it
white
on
noise.
and like, good night, they're fine. And I agree with you. It keeps them on under a blanket the whole night, because they wake up on different ends, and I think it also probably signals to their brain, send signals that they're getting ready for bed.
Yeah, it's a great cue for sleep, and it's a wearable blanket that doesn't fall off, especially as we move into colder months. Some babies will get cold in the night, and if they're not in a sleep sack, that can cause waking. So I love them. You don't have to use them, but it's not like children get used to them and then they can never go without a sleep sack. Like when my kids were babies, I would go somewhere and forget it and they could still sleep. Like it's not a crutch. It's just, it's a nice tool that does help.
I know. I think my mom, what did she say? She's going to kill me if she listens to this. she's like, it wouldn't be comfortable if I had that sleep sack on. I wouldn't be comfortable. I'm like, he's a toddler. Like, he doesn't know. He's comfortable. He's basically, we had the snoo.
Oh, yeah.
And that one is, a strapped down kind of safety sleep sack. So he's been in a sleep sack since the beginning of his life. And I think
they like feeling kind of confined and like, snuggled. Yeah.
But no, I love the sleep sack. We just transitioned to a bit of a warmer one, obviously the warmer months. And he has slept in the last few days like a little bit longer. So maybe when because he was going through like a 5:30 a.m. for the last few weeks waking. I'm like, maybe he was cold. I don't know.
Maybe.
It's a weird time of year because you don't really need the heat on.
I know.
But it gets cold in the morning or in the night.
Yeah.
But that one's a funny one. Okay. And it's good to know on the blanket. I feel like we always as parents are ready almost to move to the next step.
Yes.
Like you're ready for them to crawl and then you're ready for them to eat, crawl, walk, whatever the order is for you.
Yeah.
And it's reassuring to know that, okay, there is time. Don't put timelines too soon on these things because I've heard that a bunch of times from friends. Keep them in the crib as long as possible.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a new baby at home or other siblings, then that can disrupt them.
Yes.
And also probably just help you sleep better as a parent, knowing your baby's safe and, hopefully still in their crib, not jumping out.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Like if you do have to move your toddler to a bed, it's absolutely a safety issue, right? So like making sure there's nothing they can get into.
Drawers
Everything's
are locked.
Exactly. The dressers are attached to the wall, all of that, because I even like sometimes even putting like a gate at the door can be helpful just to create like a physical reminder that like, because you can't have your 2-year-old walking around the house at night. That's not safe.
No. Okay, let's do the cribs as long as possible.
Yes.
Okay, I want to talk about some of your parent coaching stuff because I'm curious because this is kind of newer, I think.
It is.
And like we were saying, communication is a huge part in explaining, but right now a lot of probably when people are contacting you for this is when they're in that toddler stage and they don't listen to no, or they're throwing things or they're throwing tantrums. So walk me through kind of like a typical conversation you've had with a parent when they're reaching that breakdown or like they've crossed the threshold that they can't do anything. How do you start kind of working with parents that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of parents, they're like overwhelmed and conflicted. There's so much information out there. There's recently an article, I don't know if you read it, about like gentle parenting and like, has it gone too far? And I do think for a lot of us, like we were brought up in homes where it was more authoritarian, where,
don't do that.
Exactly. Your parent was the boss and you often felt overpowered. And I think sometimes some of us have swung too far the other way, which is what we would call permissive parenting, which is essentially like you're giving in, you're giving empty threats, the child is kind of running the household. And there is like, there's a middle ground there. But I think a lot of parents are confused. They're like, are we using timeouts? Are we not?
Do we raise our voice? Do we not?
Exactly. Yeah, I think so. For a lot of people, they want a middle of the road approach. And so they want to know how to deal with tantrums or meltdowns, or they want to know how to make certain parts of their day run more smoothly, like the morning routine or the bedtime routine, things like that. So I will say, like, I think meltdowns and tantrums are up there for sure. And there is a difference between the two. So maybe I'll just briefly explain that. It might be helpful because part of my job is, to figure out like what is the root cause. Like I like getting to know like why is this behavior happening? Because every behavior is telling us something. So a meltdown is something that's physically or emotionally overwhelming a child. So
can I give you a scenario?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So leaving the park or trying to leave a store, or not in the store, but you're out in the parking lot or at the park and you want to put your child back in the car seat.
Yes.
And they don't want to go in the car seat.
Yeah.
Would that be a tantrum or a meltdown?
So that one's a bit tricky. That could actually be either, because it could be a meltdown if your child's like overtired or hungry, or overstimulated. So that could be like a feeling of overwhelm and they just can't really deal with that. Or it could be a tantrum, on the other hand, is basically you saying no to your child. So your child asks for, you know, doesn't want to leave the park, for example, and you hold the boundary of like, no, we have to go home and get dinner.
Or lots of warnings. I do lots of warnings,
Warnings
like 10
are great.
warnings.
Yes. Yeah. As long as you like really hold the boundary when it's time to go,
Yeah.
because often when our children whine or throw a fit or a tantrum, as parents, we're like, oh, I don't want to deal with this right now. So you give in and you give an extra few minutes.
You have to deal with it because it's
I
always
mean,
going to happen.
And that's the thing. And even if you give 5 more minutes, who's to say the same thing's not going to happen in 5 minutes? So, so yeah, like that could be either. I think it would probably be more of like a meltdown in that situation, that for whatever reason they're having a hard time accepting being put in the car seat. Tantrums are, you know, if your child's having a tantrum because they don't want to leave the park and they're flailing around and losing their
throwing
mind,
their head back.
Yeah, you do have to kind of ride it out and just know your child's going to have some big feelings. The number one thing you can do is just hold the boundary and validate, you know, I see you're upset. You wanted to play longer. We do have to go home right now, but I'm happy to bring you back here tomorrow. Would you like to come after daycare or after dinner? Like giving a bit of choice, letting them know they're seen and heard, but also holding the boundary. And sometimes you also just need to give your child a bit of space. If it's safe to do so and you've validated and you've, you know, held the boundary, it's okay to also step back if you have time and it's safe and just give your child a couple minutes to have their feelings.
Regroup.
Yeah, and then you can offer a hug or
a snack.
Exactly,
a toy.
Something. But yeah, I think like the number one mistake with those kinds of big reactions is parents giving in, because then what it signals to the child is like, this works. So then the next time something happens, they remember it working the last time. So then
in their benefit.
Exactly. So they're like, well, I'll just do the same thing, right? Because toddlers are pushing boundaries until the boundary's found. So they'll just keep pushing until you have like a black and white boundary.
Yeah, and it's so true. I think that obviously is probably what you're describing as the middle ground of kind of, you know, gentle parenting, being able to communicate well and letting them have some of their feelings because they're going to.
Yeah.
And I try and do that, and I kind of see different things on social media or read different things. Especially since he started daycare, there's been a bit more, you know, he's tired. He's probably like a little mad. He's letting these emotions and feelings out when he gets home.
Yes.
Especially just with mom when it's just me.
Yeah.
My mom was there yesterday evening all night, and like he was good as gold, and I was like, can you just come over every day because he's so happy. But the toy throwing is new for us.
Okay.
Toy throwing. But I'll give him a couple warnings, and I will take the toy away.
Perfect.
And I was putting it sometimes in the laundry room, which is just you know, around the corner. Or now I physically put it somewhere that he can see it because I read that. I don't know if this is good. I'll put it up on the counter. We can and I say like, you're going to break this. We don't throw our belongings and treat them poorly. Like I talk to him as if he's 30 years old sometimes.
Yeah, I love that.
And we're gonna leave it there. And if you want it back, you cannot throw it. And then he sometimes still throws it. And then I just leave it there, and then he'll move on to something else. But I don't know.
No, I think you're on the right track for sure. I think that like if you are, that would be like a logical consequence, right? Your child's throwing the toy, you give them a warning, you know, either you play nicely with your toy or your toy is going to have to take a break. And then your child has the choice, and then it's up to them. Do they want to throw it again? And the toy goes away.
So if they throw it again, what do I do, Lindsay?
You take it away.
Okay. Like out of just like bye, it's gone.
Yeah, I would, and it should really be gone for the rest of the day.
Okay.
I would say.
That
So I
makes
wouldn't
sense.
give it back because that sends mixed messages. It should be like you give him a fair chance to play nicely with the toy. If he throws it again,
then they think it's a
it goes
game.
away. Exactly.
Right? Then they like looks at me and kind of laughs and throws it and wants me to say or do something.
And that's exactly what it is. It's an attention seeking thing, right? Like often when toddlers throw something, their food or a toy, sometimes we're giving a big reaction, not even on purpose, right? We're just like, oh, you can't do that. And you know, whether it's negative or positive attention, they're getting something from that. So the other thing I would say is like, try to be as cool and calm about it and matter of fact. You know, we can't throw toys. That's not safe. You can either play nicely with
Like
your
just
toy.
say it like that, just normal.
Exactly.
Okay,
Just
that
normal.
makes sense.
Yeah.
I like that.
Because the more amped up you are and the more emotion, the child's like, ooh, like I
Okay.
got mom all riled up. Like,
Right.
let me try that again.
Yeah, I remember reading that for some of the food throwing that sometimes, months ago, he'll still throw it occasionally if he hates it. But I would just pick it up and kind of be like, don't throw your food. I don't want to clean it up. That's not very nice. And then just put it away instead of being like, oh my gosh, don't throw your food.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't make a big deal about it. Just be matter of fact. And the more you're consistent with your response around throwing food or throwing toys, he'll get it, right? Like he's still young, so it's going to take a few more months of that consistency, but eventually he's not really going to bother anymore because he's not getting anything out of that.
Okay, and what would be your biggest advice for the word no? When people are perhaps saying, oh, my child, I'm telling him no, or that's dangerous or whatever, and they're not listening, like what are some of the easiest ways to kind of communicate what no means?
Yeah, no is a tricky one. I think it's actually quite an overused word as parents. When you think about how often you're saying no, even when I think about my kids who are now older, I have to say no to them quite a bit still. So trying to think about like, can I say no but give another option? Or if your child's asking for a cookie for breakfast and that's not something that you do in your household, instead of just saying no, of course you can't have a cookie, it's breakfast, maybe you can say no, we're not having cookies before we have breakfast, but I'm happy to give you one after lunch or after dinner. What do you think? And giving them a bit of choice, giving them some options. And same thing, like if your child's jumping on the couch and you don't want them on the couch, instead of just saying like, no, we don't jump on the couch, give another, well, where can they jump? Can they jump in the basement? On the couch? Do they have a little trampoline? So I think like just the blanket no, our kids hear so often. So trying to give some other options it can be really helpful.
No, I like
or
that.
trying to say yes when you can, right?
Yeah.
Like often our go-to is just no, but if you actually think about it, maybe you can do the thing they're asking. Maybe you can take 5 minutes and, whatever it is. So I think just be more mindful about how you're using the word.
And I find there's so many other things that my son would like to do. And in that moment, whether it's trying to jump on the couch or now some of the drawers he couldn't open before in the kitchen, he wants to open them.
Yeah.
And distraction, I think, is a good thing. Like, you want to play with that? How about we go and play with your puzzles? Let's do puzzles or let's build a tower. If I say like stickers, the puzzles or the tower, he immediately runs in and wants to do those things.
Yes,
which,
exactly.
I mean, it's not necessarily always going to keep him out of certain things I don't want him to do or things in, but it's a good way to not just say no and shut him down.
Exactly.
Or I'll say, you can't play with those pots and pans because they're heavy and you'll hurt your
And
toes.
loud.
Here's the Tupperware. You can have this stuff.
Yes, that's
and
exactly
loud.
right. Yeah, giving alternatives. And also like sometimes our children are just looking for our attention, right? And if they feel like they're constantly being pushed off and it's no, I'm busy, I'm making dinner, it stings a little bit, right? So if you can take 5 or 10 minutes to say, you know what, we can't do that, but I would love to play with your blocks with you. Do you want to play with your, offering some one-on-one time, that can just help fill their attention bucket. And then they'll be less likely to push because often that's what our little ones are seeking out. They're trying to fill their attention bucket. And when it's not being filled proactively with like nice one-on-one time, then they will look for that in other ways. And often that is the negative behavior because they're just trying to meet those needs.
Yeah, the gentle, I think as a person and a mom, I try and be fair in a lot of different ways and still be disciplined because, again, I need the structure. I need him to understand because if not, I feel like they're just going to be wild animals and run the household. And I do not want that. And sometimes I think parents probably do all the textbook things and try them and their child is still a little out of control. But like that, then you probably want to get help from an expert. But I feel like, a lot of it is on us to make decisions and do things that as a parent aren't always going to be easy. And
100%.
maybe we know we're going to hurt their feelings or we're going to be upset, but you kind of just have to, that's part of being a parent, I think, is just pushing
100%.
through.
Yeah.
And you know, you want them to grow up to be good little adolescents and teenagers and adults. And I think it starts when they're like really small.
It does, yeah. And they need like boundaries and rules and limits. That's what ultimately makes our kids feel safe. And if there's no leader and it's like the child feels like they're the one in control, that's not a good place. That's not a good feeling for them. They need, I think it's Dr. Becky that calls it like, you need to be the sturdy leader. And I love that, right? Like you're the leader. It doesn't mean you're not fair. It doesn't mean you're not kind. Yeah. But it's your job. Like our children are not, like their brains are not developed to be
they're
able
literally
to
looking at us all the time. We're like, what?
Exactly. Yeah. No. So I think you're on the right path. It sounds like you're doing a lot of.
I'm trying, but I think that the big takeaway is the reaction thing, and also. Yeah, like our parents, I love them. They're the best, but sometimes they default back to how we would have been raised or things that, you know, are, I don't know, normal to them that you kind of have to. Yeah. But I feel like a lot of them just think you're crazy. Again, back to the sleep sack thing. Yeah. My mom was saying to him the other day, like, don't get mad. Like, don't do that. And I'm like, no, you tell him, like, he's frustrated. Just say, you're frustrated. Right. Here's how you do it. Yeah. And I know the gals, at his daycare, I've heard them talk to other kids like that. So I think that's how they're, you know, like EC workers, how they teach and train them, because they need to label their feelings and their emotions, which if I didn't kind of read that or learn that myself, I wouldn't have known that. I would have just been like, stop that. Don't do that.
Exactly.
But not helpful.
No. They need, like, they don't know what they're feeling, right? That's part of the issue, is that they have all these feelings and they don't know what to do with them. Right. So it's our job to help them, label them, and help them through those moments.
Like Miss Rachel says, smell the roses.
Exactly.
Blow out the birthday candles.
That's right.
Sometimes I tell him that. And once we were in the car, he wasn't even upset, but we were talking about like deep breathing, or he might have just started doing it. And he was like obsessed with being like, that's so cute. So sometimes I tell him, take a deep breath. Yeah. And again, like some parents may have, but our parents didn't do that, I don't think, or even kind of understand what sitting and meditating and doing things like that are. And I think it's really important that those are options now for children to sit and kind of like understand and express their emotions, or say, especially for little boys, I think that's like that toxic masculinity thing that's been around for a long time. It's like, little boys don't cry, little boys don't do this. And it's like, you're allowed to feel sad. It's okay to be sad. Mommy feels sad when you leave. That was a big thing for daycare drop off. I was like, it's okay to feel sad. Like, I'm sad when I drop you off at daycare too. And then we're going to be so happy when we see each other.
Exactly.
And sometimes I feel crazy for talking to him like that, but I don't care.
I really think like role modeling is such a great tool we can use as parents. Like sometimes I'll do that with my kids. If they're like, something's going on and I'm like, I'll say to them, I need a minute. Like, I feel like I'm going to be upset. So I'm going to step out of the room for a few minutes. I'll come back and we'll revisit this. And all that's doing is showing them it's okay to take a beat, right? Like, if you feel like you're going to yell or lose your mind, it's okay to walk away for a few minutes. Or like, my husband will sometimes take deep breaths if there's something going on. And then that's normalized, right? So I think like some of those things you're doing, like the breathing and the explaining, like, I'm sad too, and that's all good, right? It's just,
as you're saying that, it's coming to mind. I just saw my soon-to-be sister-in-law last weekend, and she was saying her nephew, I think he's like 4. Yeah. Let's 3 or 4, that his mom had taught him to be like, I forget if it was like, I need space or I need a minute. And she says all the time that like, you'll just be walking by and he's doing something. He's like, I need my space or alone time. I can't remember what it is, but he tells them, and like, he probably means it.
Yeah. So and that's like, great. If they can identify that in themselves, like they can feel those emotions bubbling up and they can say that, I think that's great. Like so many of us didn't have those tools modeled to us as kids, and you have to learn them as adults. So if we can, provide that at a young age, I think it's really helpful.
Oh my God. Okay. This makes me feel so much better, because I feel seen, and that it's still like, there's still going to be meltdowns and tantrums and things that are hard, and we're still going to maybe lose our cool and evolve. But at least if you, over 50% of the time, let's hope that you can kind of default into some of these practices. I think it's super helpful.
Yes.
And again, like the sleep training thing, if you just try them and do it a few times, eventually, hopefully they'll catch on and learn.
Yeah.
And you also, even as a mom of a little toddler, feel so proud of them sometimes.
Oh my gosh.
In restaurants, of course, they don't want to sit or behave. But I remember being at a restaurant not that long ago, and the kids were running around a bit, which is like totally normal. They get excited when they're out and with each other. And like Cash was walking over a few times, almost like he wanted to go behind the bar of the restaurant. But like he kind of like stopped and looked, and like he knew. And maybe again, he doesn't feel safe if he goes over there. So he knows I'm not, or my mom's going to tell me, come back.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. Toddlers are crazy, but also
is.
they're full of so much exploration and emotions, and
exactly.
It's a
and
fun
I think,
time.
and you posted this on Instagram recently. Like, you're not going to get it right. I don't get it right nearly like as much as I wish I did, and like that art of apologizing and repairing with your child is so powerful. Like, it's just, again, you're role modeling so many great things, and it gives you an opportunity to have like a little mini redo and explain why you're sorry about what happened. So it's like, I think as parents, we just also have to give each other a lot of grace and give ourselves grace, because it's the hardest job. It truly is.
Truly.
And so you can't be too hard on yourself.
And I think just for people to kind of take, I would say like my biggest advice and takeaway from all of this is to just communicate with your child. Even when Cash was little, I'd put him, I mean, it's like a language thing for them to learn in his little chair when he was a baby and I was making supper. I always explained and talked to him and just was like, oh, he's listening. And I think that as he becomes a toddler and older, it's like, just explain stuff and talk to them, make them feel seen. And like you said, kind of reason with them or explain some of the boundaries and feelings is just the number one thing. So that would be my biggest advice, is just start kind of talking to them and explaining them so that they understand and kind of understand your limits as a parent. And I don't know.
Yeah,
just and don't feel crazy. I'm in the grocery store and I'm explaining and talking to him about everything.
I love that. I mean, it's a nice thing to do. It's very respectful, right? Also, like giving your child a heads up. And also, as they get older, getting their input. Like, often when I'm working with preschoolers or school-age children, it will be like a decision everybody will be in on. Like, you know, like, what would you like to do? Would you like to have your shower first, or do you want to read a couple books for, like, getting their input and giving them some like ownership over some of the things that they're doing day to day is really helpful, and it builds confidence, right? So I think that starts young with like explaining and communicating.
And just letting them, I remember we were having a little rough go with bedtime routine I don't know, a month or two ago, and I read you might need to start like switching things up and giving them options. Which pajamas would you like to wear? Which books would you like to wear? Just those little things, and like letting them pick, and they still might not be happy, but it lets them feel included and have an option. Okay, I could talk to you all day. This is why we started the podcast, or I started the podcast, because there's just, when you're a mom, you can just talk. There's always common ground, and you can talk and give each other advice or share stories. But if people want to actually get, one-on-one time or reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, you can go to my website, lindsaylewisleep.com, or I spend most of my time on social media, so it's just at Lindsay Lewis Sleep. You can send me a DM, and I'd love to chat. Yeah,
and I feel like you can book just a kind of like initial consult and dump all your issues on Lindsay, and then figure out a plan or what's best, or maybe it's nothing and you just needed. I think that's kind of what happened with us. Is I just needed some tips and guidance, and I was like, okay, I don't think I need the full thing, but some people do. Some people need to dive in, so I feel like that's where you can help them out.
For sure. Yeah, you can book a short call and we can talk about what's going on, and then talk about next steps, or maybe it's just something quick, like you said.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm so
Thanks
happy
for having
that
me.
you came in.